Hi there, I'm Luke, your friendly language and linguistics enthusiast, and this is Go Natural English. Is R a sound that you find tricky to incorporate into your everyday English because maybe you're not quite sure how English speakers make this sound in the first place? Then you have come to the right place because I'm going to help shed some light on this subject for you. In this video, I'm going to go through some of what makes North American R such a unique and often tricky sound for learners of English to make, as well as how we make this sound with our mouths, and finally incorporate some tips and tricks to improve it with plenty of practice throughout. So definitely stay through till the end. I'd also like to point out that this is going to be a three-part series, so do stay tuned for all three of those parts, preferably in order, because that will help you understand it as best as possible. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, because that helps us keep this community growing and going. Alright guys, let's get into it and discuss what is R exactly. R, believe it or not, is actually a pretty weird sound when you think about it, and it actually varies a lot depending on what language you're speaking. So if you take Spanish and Italian, for example, they tend to pronounce their R sound with the tip of the tongue tapping really, the upper front part of the mouth, just behind the teeth, and in some cases rolling it, which means quickly vibrating it. So for example, the difference between pero and perro. Then, if you look at other languages like French, they actually produce it on the opposite side of the mouth, where the back of the tongue vibrates against what's called the uvula, which is that little part hanging down in the back of your throat when they do a h sound. And then other languages like Japanese doesn't even distinguish R and L. So words like rice versus lice are very difficult for Japanese speakers to hear as well as produce because they don't really make that sound distinction like other languages do. R in this way is very unique in that different languages pronounce them in totally different parts of the mouth, and yet there's something about it that all makes it R. But without a doubt in my mind, English has to take the cake for having the weirdest R. And that is because a common question I get from students is, Luke, where does your tongue touch when you make an R sound in English? I can't figure out where to put my tongue. And the weirdest thing about English R is that it actually doesn't touch anything. Like I mentioned, in Spanish and Italian, there's contact in the front of the mouth. In French, there's contact in the back of the mouth. And other languages have a variety of different locations and ways that they make the sound, often with contact in the mouth. But English is a bit weird in that there is no contact at all. Your tongue does not touch anything. In fact, your tongue kind of just floats there. In fact, it is for this reason that many linguists, and I myself as well, believe that R is almost a bit more like a vowel sound than it is like a consonant sound because it doesn't touch any parts of the mouth. Now, don't go to your English teacher and tell them that R is a vowel, because they will probably say that you are wrong. If you are talking about spelling and writing, it is without a doubt that you follow what you learned in English class, which is that the vowels are A, E, I, O, U, and sometimes Y. But I'm more talking about how interesting R is as a sound. And I also bring it up because as these videos go along, I think that having that in the back of your mind will help give you some clarity about how we make the R sound. And it's a helpful way of thinking about it. Now, I'm going to divide our R videos into three parts, with part one focusing on what we call vocalic which is found in words like her and stir. Part 2, focusing on R at the beginning of words or syllables. found in words like red and rose. And then finally, focusing on some interesting and often difficult to say for some people words with other vowels. And we call these R-colored vowels. So these will be things like fire, hour, etc. So stay tuned for all three of these, and let me help you say this often misunderstood sound. So let's talk about You will often see it in dictionaries in the pronunciation section written in different ways. But when I talk about it and write it out in the phonetic alphabet, I will be using this symbol up here. We start here because, in my opinion, is the building block for every other sound with R that you can make, whether it's at the beginning of the word, the end of the word, or with other vowels. Is always, in my opinion, the best place to start. For tongue placement of this sound, like I said, your tongue doesn't really touch much of anything, so it's important to remember a couple things as you make this sound and play around with it. My number one tip to remember is that your jaw should be fairly high when saying It's not super low, you're not going R, but you're keeping that jaw pretty high at Number two tip to remember with placement of R in the mouth is that it should be about in the middle of the tongue. So not at the tip of the tongue like you would find in Spanish and Italian, and not at the back of the tongue like you would find in French, but more in the middle of the mouth. And if you're not sure how to do this, don't worry, stay tuned. I have some tricks and exercises to help you get your tongue in that middle position. Last but not least, number three, the tongue should be pretty wide and flat rather than narrow and thin. And again, I will give you some exercises and things to help you gain some awareness of what your tongue is doing. Part of what makes R tricky for people is that because your tongue is not touching anything, it can often be a little bit tricky figuring out where your tongue is, but with some strategies, we're going to get you there. Let's go through these tips one by one and different exercises to see how you do with them. And this will help us because different tricks work for different people, and certain people find they get the most success with some of the exercises over the others. So be sure to stay through all of them because it will help you gain an understanding of what works best for you in terms of pronouncing Now, starting with number one is jaw height. So I would recommend going in front of the mirror and placing your hand under your jaw and just seeing if you can get a better by not opening your mouth too much. I mention this because in certain language backgrounds, there's a tendency to open the jaw too much and make it more of an ah sound. So, for instance, in a word like dollar, we sometimes hear foreign language speakers lower the jaw and make more of an ah sound. So rather than dollar, dollar, where the jaw stays in a high position at the end, dollar, we find that some speakers drop the jaw down to dala, 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 too low. So try on its own with the jaw at a higher position. And for some of my students, they find that this alone is enough to get that true quality to it. If you got it, great. But if you're like many, many other people, that probably won't be enough for you. So let's try another strategy. Maybe you're doing a high jaw position, but it's sounding a bit more like dollar, dollar, where the sound isn't quite that quality that we want. That might be because you're not focusing enough of the sound in the middle of the tongue and at a high elevation. So a trick that I like to try for these folks is doing a g sound first. So if you do like a g, a g sound a couple times, you'll notice g, g, G. You'll notice that farther back in the mouth, you're making contact. G, g, g. Between the back central part of the tongue with the back central part of the roof of the mouth. With g. Okay? After you've gained some awareness of where your tongue is, I want you to try to transition that g into okay? Because when you transition to your tongue drops very, very slightly. So try that with me. Grr, grr, grr. You should notice that the tongue stays pretty center and stays fairly high, only dropping a little bit from the g. If you maintain that position, you might get more of an type sound to it. Maybe watch yourself do it in the mirror so that you can also check that your jaw is not dropping. How did that one go? Did you find that you were able to get that nice center, high quality to If not quite so much, let's try one more strategy. Maybe it sounded a bit more like g, g. I hear this in my students often because the tongue is not wide enough. So a good strategy to do this one is to practice doing an E sound. Now when you do E, your tongue tends to widen and flatten, okay? Something to try doing when you're saying the E is you might feel that the sides of your tongue touch the insides of your molars or your back teeth. So watch my tongue widen as I do E and see them touching my molars. E, E. That's what I mean by a wide tongue, okay? So let's try transitioning from an E to an where that tongue stays pretty wide. It's okay if it narrows a tiny bit, but we don't want it to narrow too much. Ear, ear, ear. You're going to feel your tongue go back a bit, but you should hopefully feel your tongue stay wide. All right, now a final exercise that puts all of this together, having high jaw height, having it in the center of the mouth, and having that wide tongue is to try the word eager, eager, where your tongue should feel like it's staying slightly wider, like the E, and it's also staying more in the center back focus of the mouth with G. So try it with me. Eager, eager, eager. All right, everyone, how was that? Did you find those tips were helpful? Or maybe one of those tips in particular was more useful to you than the others? Let us know in the comments down below and keep practicing. If you're not sure about the R pronunciation and you feel like there are still gaps in how you're saying the R sound, do stay tuned because, like I said, we will be releasing 2 more videos that focus on R in other types of circumstances. If you like tips like this, don't miss our Go Natural English tips, where you can click on a link down in the description and we will email you plenty of interesting tips and strategies to improve your English pronunciation and conversation skills. So it only takes 2 seconds and it's totally free. I have no doubt that with tips like this, you guys can continue to improve your English pronunciation. You've got this. If you liked this video and you would like to see more content like it, be sure to click on this video up here for more. And I will see you guys at our next video. Bye!